Good evening, everyone. So, today we'll be discussing anesthesia management in pulmonary thromboembolism. Now, before going to anesthesia management directly, we'll be discussing about pulmonary thromboembolism, how it is diagnosed, what the clinical presentation of the patient could be, and how do you manage. So, you all know that the most common cause of pulmonary thromboembolism is the embolization of deep vein thrombosis. So, VTE stands for venous thromboembolism, and the overall incidence of VTE, that is venous thromboembolism, is higher in women below the age of 45 years. That's because of the presence of estrogen, and also above the age of 80 years in women because there is a longer life expectancy in women. And if pulmonary embolism does not happen because of the embolization of the deep vein thrombosis, and it happens because of an internal problem, internal abnormality inside the pulmonary circulation, then that happens because of the Virchow's triad, which comprises of blood coagulation, venous stasis, and endothelial injury, which initiates a thrombosis. Now, whenever the pulmonary arterial area gets obstructed by more than 50%, you call it pulmonary embolism. So, what are the risk factors for venous thrombosis? Here we are discussing the risk factors for venous thrombosis and not for pulmonary embolism per se. Obviously, venous thrombosis is the most common cause of pulmonary thromboembolism. So, that is why we are discussing the risk factors for VTE, that is venous thromboembolism. So the strong risk factors are hip or leg fracture, or hip or leg joint replacement, or major general surgery, major trauma, spinal cord injury, and there are several other risk factors as well. So always try to remember that it could be either some coagulopathic abnormality, or it could be any disease or surgery that has caused the patient to be bedridden. So decreased mobility of the patient, which causes increased stasis, or increased pooling of the blood in the lower limbs. So that causes increased propensity for venous thrombosis, and then further that increases the risk for embolization of these thrombi into the pulmonary circulation, because you know that the venous return, it goes back from the IVC, it drains into the right atrium, and then the emboli will migrate from the RA, then the RV, and then into the pulmonary circulation. So that's why we are very worried about the pulmonary embolism that happens because of DVT. So now, why are we so worried about pulmonary embolism? So in pulmonary embolism, what is happening is there is an obstruction of the pulmonary circulation. So that is going to have an impact on the lungs, as well as it's going to have an impact on the heart. So once the obstruction of the pulmonary arterial lumen increases, so that causes an increased pulmonary vascular resistance. And obviously that's going to increase the ventilation perfusion mismatch. Now, how is it going to happen? As the pulmonary circulation is going to get compromised, there is going to be a decreased perfusion in the respective regions of the lung. But obviously, the ventilation is not going to be affected, because here the abnormality is inside the pulmonary circulation. The alveoli or the lung parenchyma per se is not affected. So that is why the ventilation is going to happen, but there is going to be an abnormality in the perfusion. So that is going to cause increased ventilation perfusion mismatch, and that is going to cause hypoxia, desaturation. So patient can first land up into type 1 respiratory failure, and then can progress into type 2 respiratory failure. So type 1 respiratory failure is there is decrease in the oxygen levels in the body, so that causes hypoxemia. And then finally, when the patient's respiratory muscles, they go into fatigue, and the patient stops. So the initial manifestation is the tachypnea, right? So that is why the patient lands into type 1 respiratory failure, because the patient is so hyperventilating that the patient tends to exhale out the CO2. That is why if you draw an ABG sample of this patient at that point of time, you may not find high CO2 levels. But if once the patient goes into fatigue, the tachypnea subsides and CO2 retention starts to happen, and then the type 2 respiratory failure starts. So this is what happens with the lung. So initially we'll get a presentation of hypoxemia, desaturation, which will progress to hypercarbia. But this increased PVR also has an effect on the heart, because obviously against this increased PVR, which ventricle has to function? That's the right ventricle. So that is why more and more, and you know that right ventricle is more compliant as compared to left ventricle, because left ventricle has a large muscle mass as compared to the right ventricle. Right ventricle is a relatively, it's very thin walled ventricle, so that's why it's able to dilate very much. But as far as the contractility is concerned, specifically when there is increased afterload to the right ventricle, RV dysfunction and then RV failure is very common. So that is why increased PVR is going to impose great pressures on the RV, and that is going to cause RV dysfunction, RV dilatation, and those increased pressures are going to get transmitted to the RA, and therefore increased JVP, and then further systemic congestion, and all signs of right heart failure are going to happen. So this is why we are very worried about pulmonary embolism. Now there are types of pulmonary embolism. So one could be a massive pulmonary embolism, in which pulmonary embolism is associated with hemodynamic compromise, in which the systolic blood pressure is less than 90 millimeters of mercury, or there is an abrupt fall of systolic blood pressure by 40 millimeters of mercury, or the patient is on vasopressor support. So any patient who is hemodynamically unstable with a pulmonary embolism is called as massive pulmonary embolism. There is something called a submassive pulmonary embolism also, in which you know that the patient has pulmonary embolism. You perform an echocardiography in that patient, you will see that there is RV dysfunction in that patient, but the patient is so far hemodynamically stable. So you know that there is an impending massive pulmonary embolism in this patient, and at that point of time, you have to stop the progression. So that is going to be called a submassive pulmonary embolism. And low risk pulmonary embolism or stable pulmonary embolism is the patient has pulmonary embolism but does not really meet the criteria of massive or submassive pulmonary embolism. The patient is hemodynamically stable, RV dysfunction may not be present, and otherwise the patient is stable. So now, how would a patient with pulmonary embolism present? So the patient would present either with sudden onset of dyspnea or chronic progressive dyspnea. So that would depend upon how gradually or how fast the pulmonary embolism is developing. So if it's an acute pulmonary embolism, the patient may present with sudden onset of dyspnea. If gradually the pulmonary thrombi are developing, and that is gradual, there is a gradual obstruction of the pulmonary circulation, then the patient will have a gradual progression of NYHA grade of dyspnea. The patient will have chest pain. Now, the chest pain could be because of ischemia to that particular region of the lung because of the obstruction of the pulmonary circulation. The patient could have hemoptysis. The patient could have cough because of increase in the pulmonary congestion. Now, as the pulmonary pressures keep on increasing because of pulmonary emboli, we just talked that pulmonary vascular resistance increases. So pulmonary pressures will also increase because of the pulmonary obstruction. Increase in the hydrostatic pressures will cause increase of the transfer of the drainage of the fluid from the pulmonary circulation into the alveoli. So that will cause cough. Then the patient will land up into hemodynamic instability, and obviously signs of right ventricular failure will also be present. Also, in that patient, if the predisposing factor is deep vein thrombosis, then signs and symptoms of DVT would also be present. There is pain and tenderness, redness, warmth over the lower limbs. Positive Homan sign will be also present, which is the discomfort in the calf muscles on forced dorsiflexion of the foot with keeping the knee straight. So, whenever a pulmonary embolism patient walks, whenever you see a pulmonary embolism, you always look for the clinical presentation of the patient. So, these could be the signs and symptoms of the patient. And always remember that most common cause of pulmonary thromboembolism. So, here remember that we are talking, this presentation is about pulmonary thromboembolism and not of pulmonary embolism occurring because of other causes. So pulmonary thromboembolism is caused by the embolization of deep vein thrombosis. So that's why never forget to see for any history of DVT or any signs and symptoms of DVT in that patient.